Welcome to the G5 Hive and our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into the G5 college football landscape with the folks who know the teams the best. If you're watching this on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review. Today we'll be heading over to the Mountain West Conference and taking a look at the Colorado State Rams. They finished 8-5 in 2024 and capped off their season with an appearance in the Arizona Bowl. They wrapped up their 2025 spring practice with their spring game on April 26th. We have a special guest joining us today. He is a reporter who covers Colorado State athletics for the Coloradoan, and he is a Heisman voter. He is Kevin Lytle. Kevin can be found on X at Kevin_Lytle. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to this.
We are too, and for those who are just tuning into the G5 Hive for the first time, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've been covering Colorado State?
Yes, I've been on the Colorado State beat, I think, since 2017, fully. Been around kind of in and out before that for a long time as well. So I've been around the program for quite a while now. I'm from Colorado native. So yeah, happy to be and fortunate to be working close to home and in a pretty cool job, if I do say so myself.
Well, for those not familiar with the Rams' offensive style, how would you describe it?
Yeah, it's interesting because, Jay Norvell, when he was hired, he's an air raid coach. He has Matt Mumme on staff, who's, literal son of the air raid and Hal Mumme. But it hasn't been, maybe I should say the offense has shifted and changed over the years. A couple of years ago, 22 or 23, I think it was pretty legit air raid. Last season, they went really ground heavy. CSU ran the ball 54% of the time. Partially is due to personnel. Top receiver Torrey Horton missed most of the season injured. Jay Norvell, frankly, didn't trust his defense or defensive coordinator more specifically and wanted to protect them by kind of eating the clock. So all that led to kind of a pro-style run-heavy offense. I expect it to be a little bit more toward the air raid this year. In 2025, they plan to throw the ball around a bit more and play with more tempo, but there probably isn't one specific style because it's shifted a few times in Norvell's 4 years.
Well, you talked about him wanting to throw the ball around, so let's get to the position where it all starts on offense, and that's the quarterback. I believe there were high hopes for Braden Fowler-Nicolosi in 2024, especially after the media buzz around the NIL when it came to the Colorado State, Kansas State talk. But in 2025, it's a new year, and it's a new slate. Braden's back for his junior year, along with 2023 Utah High School Male Athlete of the Year, Jackson Brousseau. How did Braden look in the spring?
Yeah, Braden is definitely the clear number one guy. He's one of those, it's starting to feel like he's been in the program for a long time, and there have been so many variations, from a couple years ago when he became the starter week 2, and kind of burst on the scene with the big game at Colorado. And then, he had a pretty good year there, although pretty up and down with some interceptions and stuff. Then, I broke that first story of Jay Norvell saying schools offered $600,000 for him. And it's just taken on a life of its own since then. It's pretty crazy how it continues to resurface in different ways. It's pretty wild. But he's the undisputed number one. Like I say, CSU changed the offense a lot last year, and the numbers were obviously way down as far as like yards, pass attempts, all that. But Norvell, likes to say and claim that, Braden Fowler-Nicolosi learned a ton last year of run checks, how to make sure you're making the right audibles, getting everyone in the right place. And now I think this is, it sounds dramatic to say, but in some ways I think this is legacy year for Braden Fowler-Nicolosi. If he can put up big yards, like I say, they're going to throw it more and lead the team to a bunch of wins. Once again, he could be, one of the highly regarded quarterbacks in Colorado State history. But I think there are some fans that, even though he has, pretty good numbers overall, are skeptical. The footwork has issues at times. There are bad turnovers, and it's still just been inconsistent at times. But all that said, he's less than 3,000 yards away from Colorado State's all-time passing record, which is definitely achievable this year. So, BFN is, far and away number one. I don't foresee competition for that spot, barring injury. It's a big year for him. Like I said, BFN is how he's affectionately known for fans around here. And frankly, it shortens it down a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of a tongue twister sometimes.
Yeah.
For those who are not familiar with Braden's game, how would you describe it?
It's kind of likewise. It's evolved. When he first came on, it very much just a gunslinger, very live arm, whips, he can really whip a pass. And there's the good and bad of that. He believes he can make every throw, and physically he can, but that means, he's had times where he forces things that aren't there. He's also grown. I'm not going to say he's a runner, but he has athletic mobility, pocket mobility, can move the pocket, and he seemed to grow more comfortable with that, even to the point, I believe there was a naked boot that he scored from like 25 yards out last year. I'd have to check the exact yardage on that, but pretty long one. So like I say, not necessarily a runner, but a mobile player. And again, now in basically year 3 as a starter, he should be a very, heady veteran player, but a very live arm is the most noticeable thing.
Well, you talked about BFN having a pretty solid grasp on this number 1 role. Who's got the leg up on the number 2? You got Jackson Brousseau that I mentioned. You got Darius Curry. You got Taj Bullock just comes over from Akron. Who's got this leg up for number 2?
Yeah, the Bullock coming in. Maybe I do want to say changes things in spring. I still think Brousseau's probably a number 2. I think it's pretty tight between him and Curry. They kind of split reps. There were a couple of times where BFN was rested or protected, and those guys kind of split reps. I would say if it came down to it, an injury situation, you had to move, it would have been Brousseau. But now that with Taj Bullock coming in, I find that fascinating. He's a guy that he's never started much, but has played a decent amount over his 4 years. I think he has 22 or 23 games over the last couple of years at Akron, mostly as a kind of wildcat runner option, but threw some passes. I think he had 3 starts in the last few years. So I don't think he's a guy that's there to take BFN's job, but he's also coming in with only 1 year of eligibility. I don't imagine he's doing that to just sit on the bench. So I would have to think that Colorado State pitched him some packages. CSU did have some wildcat options last year that they used in short down and goal line situations where they would go direct snap to Avery Morrow, the running back. So I kind of wonder if now you slide Bullock in there, and he's a guy that obviously can run it, but give you a throwing option. So he's definitely in that mix. Again, you hope no injury happens, but it would be interesting if there's a long-term, absence for BFN, if it'd be Bullock or if they go, someone like Brousseau who could probably run maybe more of the full offense.
Let's move over to that running game. And heading into 2024, this was a crowded room. People were curious just how things would be divided up. Well, it turned out to be the Avery Morrow and Justin Marshall show in Fort Collins. Avery Morrow has graduated, which leaves 183 rushing attempts, 997 yards, and 9 touchdowns vacant. Is this the Justin Marshall show here in 2025, or has someone else kind of stepped up to emerge in that Avery Morrow role?
Yeah, that became even more important than anyone probably anticipated because, when we talked this time last year, no one knew, including the coaching staff, I think, that it was going to be a run-heavy offense. They didn't really switch that until mid-August. It was a very late change. And then Morrow had a really strong season. But they love their running back room for 25. Jay Norvell actually said he thinks it's the best he's ever had as a coach. Justin Marshall, I think, is probably your lead guy. Jalen Dupree, he only had 25 carries last year as a true freshman, but averaged 6 yards a carry. A really physical downhill runner. They brought in Lloyd Avant from Tulsa, a guy that didn't play a ton last year at Tulsa, but has a nice recruiting resume from high school. He put up some crazy numbers in high school. He looks like he'll be a good slasher runner and can also catch the ball. He'll return kicks as well. So just a versatile guy. And then even a Keegan Hollis, he's had a lot of injury issues in his career, but he was healthy in spring. He's still seems as fast as ever, and he's a real speed guy. So those 4 are all part of the mix. I'd say Marshall, on August 30th at Washington, he probably gets the first carry, but I expect a whole lot of Dupree as well. I think he has a chance to be a star.
Justin Marshall missed some of spring, I guess, with injury. Yeah. But do you anticipate he's going to be, fully recovered and ready to go come fall camp?
Yep, he should be good to go. It is relatively minor. He even, I believe, is the second to last practice of spring. He was out there, and then they just protected him during the spring game and didn't have him in the live reps, but he should be good to go. That's been his biggest thing, though. When he's on the field, he's good, but he's gotten banged up a little bit through the course of his career so far. So his availability is, certainly one of the things to watch.
This wide receiver room will look a heck of a lot different here in 2025. And the Rams graduate Torrey Horton, who's now a Seattle Seahawk, Dane Olson, Donovan Ollie. They also saw 3 guys hit the portal, and that's a lot of production lost that needs to be replaced. You said they're going to throw the ball. Well, what are they going to do with those lost 172 targets, 1,548 yards, and 7 touchdowns? This room's highlighted by the return of Jordan Ross, and then their reception leader from a season ago, Armani Winfield. This staff also brought in 4 transfers. What are the expectations for this room heading into 2025?
Yeah, it's going to be so fascinating. Torrey Horton was, the star for so long. I mean, even with the Norvell at Nevada, he was really good, as a young player, and then just great at CSU until the injury kind of derailed things last year. So that's a huge question. CSU's hope is that, they admit they don't have a Torrey Horton. There's not going to be a guy that, will probably have 110 catches for 1,500 yards. They don't have that right now. But they think overall it could be a deeper group. So I think the idea is, rather than, hit one guy over and over and over again, it's one here, one here, one here, one here, one here. And, we look up at the end of the season, there's 4 receivers in the 300 to 600 yard range. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Jordan Ross, he's a 4-star recruit, showed flashes last year, like you mentioned, had some big moments. As a young player, it's all just about consistency now, being able to do that week in, week out. Another interesting name to watch is Tommy Maher. He's also a sophomore, burst on the scene kind of late last season. He was a walk-on, but a guy from Mater Day, Jack Howell, the great safety over the last few years, actually at media days last year, name dropped Tommy to me, basically unprovoked. I did, we're just generally talking about the receivers. He said, watch out for this kid. I'm kind of thinking, what is he talking about? This walk-on? And then sure enough, he burst on scenes. He's one of those route technicians. He just, the phrase around CSU is he's always open. So he's a guy that's going to have a big chance. Winfield missed spring with injury, but he should be good to go. They need him to step up. He was decent last year, not bad. But they need him to be, quite good, because he's the most veteran, probably has the skill set to be able to elevate. And then probably one of the biggest wild cards is Kojo Antwi, a transfer from Ohio State. He's another one of those, had a really high recruiting profile, didn't really crack the rotation at Ohio State, which, that's not embarrassing. That's like, I think their receiver room is better than some NFL receiving rooms. So that, he's a guy with a lot of potential, but he got injured late in Ohio State's run to the national title. So his timeline's a little uncertain on when he'll be available, but he could be a big one. And then they have some young guys that they're hoping can step up as well, or other young guys. I guess I've mentioned a couple. A guy like Levon Brown is probably a name to keep an eye on. And then I'm sure we'll move on to the tight ends, but that's going to be a big part of the receiving equation as well. But I think overall, don't look for one superstar rather than several guys chipping in.
Well, you mentioned Armani and Antwi missing time due to injury. Has anyone developed a nice connection there with BFN in the spring?
I'd say Ross and Tommy Maher are probably at the top of that group. Levon Brown. Another guy I should mention, Tay Lanier. He had a really good spring. He's another transfer. He is at New Mexico, then went to Northern Arizona. Had actually briefly committed to CSU a couple of years ago, but didn't work out. He had a great spring as well. I would say he, every team has a couple of those like big spring winners. Tay Lanier was that for CSU. So he's a guy, he has the physical abilities that if he can be one of those that has, 40 or 50 catches, that really changes the equation for the Rams.
Who do you think we see out there week 1 catching passes from BFN?
I'd say Winfield, Lanier, Ross, and Maher are 4 guys that I'd be pretty stunned if they don't all have a catch week 1.
Moving over to that tight end room, if you were to describe how tight ends are utilized in this offense to someone that's never caught a Rams game, how would you describe it?
Again, it's going to change a bit from maybe what it was last year, but ideally, touchdowns. That's the biggest thing. I mean, they have pretty good history. You look at Cole Turner back when this staff was at Nevada. His last year, I know it was double digits. I think it was 11 or 12 touchdowns. Dallin Holker a few years ago at CSU was a huge production guy. They didn't really have that player last year, but they have two guys they're really excited about this year. And Jackson Warren, who's a really cool story. He was a quarterback recruit. Once upon a time, he was at Matt Mummy's quarterback camp at Nevada, but then continued to grow, transitioned to tight end, played a year at JUCO, and then he was at CSU last year, but missed last season with shoulder surgeries. So he's back for his first FBS season, but he's one of those maybe raw, but big potential prospects. And then Rocky Beers coming in from FIU. One, he has the best name in the world. Two, his resume come in, looked a guy that, would help out, but not necessarily be a superstar or anything. But in spring, man, he looks the part. He runs really well. He's smooth, good catch radius. Every day he was making big plays. So those two guys, they're really excited and think that they could do a lot of damage with those two. So between those two, if things go well for CSU this season, you should have, double-digit touchdowns combined with the two of them.
Did Jackson Warren look recovered from his injury from a year ago?
Yeah, they slowly kind of built him up. I don't think he ever got live contact, but he was doing all the drills and everything. His mobility, catch radius, all that looked plenty good. And like I say, his shoulders and like I say, as a former quarterback, there'd be times I'd see him throwing a ball around. So everything looked fine there. Obviously, the contact bit is going to be the last test, but he seemed good to go, or will be good to go come August.
Given those two talented guys, do you think you might see them both on the field at the same time, or you think maybe it's going to be more rotation of those two?
Yeah, I think you'll see both. I think you could do a couple different things. You could either, have them both lined up at, a traditional tight end position. Especially Warren, I won't be surprised if you split him out, into almost a receiver spot at times. I absolutely think they'll run, some twin towers out there.
We talked about some NIL deals, and I know the NCAA doesn't allow this, but man, Rocky Beers going to Colorado. It seems like an NIL deal that should be made in heaven.
Someone's
right?
got to work the loopholes on that one. And, for folks who aren't familiar, so Fort Collins is a really big beer community, a lot of craft brewery locations, and New Belgium is from Fort Collins, and one of the end zones is the New Belgium Porch. It's like a really cool beer garden. So the marketing potential of Rocky Beers catching a touchdown and celebrating with fans in the New Belgium Porch, I mean, that does its work for you, doesn't it?
Yeah, writes itself. The offensive line may be a concern for the Rams here in 2025. The Rams graduate their starting left tackle, Savion Henderson, right guard, Drew Moss, and center, and also first-team All-Conference Jacob Gardner. This line will be anchored by the return of their starting right tackle, Aaron Karras, and starting left guard, Tanner Morley. Now, I mentioned this O-line may be a concern heading into the season, but maybe it isn't, as the staff has only brought in a couple transfers. I assume that means the staff feels pretty good about the guys that they have in this room, but what are the expectations for this room heading into 2025?
Yeah, there's no doubt it's huge turnover. Those guys that you mentioned that left, I mean, a ton of starts between them. I don't need, you pray, whatever the math is, it's a boatload. Jacob Gardner feels like he started for like 20 years for CSU. So yeah, that's, it's not easy for sure. Especially the center position and how important Jacob Gardner was both in the locker room and, calls on the field and stuff. But yeah, like you mentioned, the fact that they haven't brought it, it's not like they brought in 10 new guys or whatever. So that makes you think they're pretty confident some of the guys stepping up. And that's what it looked like in spring. Trevin Heil, a guy who's been in the system for a long time, has been running the center position. They think he knows the offense really well. Matt Mummy, the sort of offensive coordinator, pass game coordinator, said he's one of those overachiever type guys who just every time you think you're bringing in someone better, he finds a way to earn his way up the depth charts. They like him. They have Christian Martin at left tackle, has been really coming along. like you mentioned, Karras at right tackle. He's been solid. All of a sudden has become a veteran. Tanner Morley's, I think, maybe one of the leaders on the team overall, not just the offensive line. So Bill Best, I know, after spring, say felt pretty comfortable with about 8 guys. Ideally would like to get to about 10. But overall, I think they're feeling pretty good about where they're at there, given how much they lost. There's still going to be some battles in fall, and they did bring in a couple guys to try and add some depth. But overall, considering those losses, I think they're feeling pretty good.
We can talk about the left tackle and guard and whatnot, and the left side, but I guess I'm curious about the right guard. Who takes over the right guard spot for Drew Moss?
Yeah, that's trying to run through my Rolodex here at the moment to recall exactly. That must be Aitor Uronabachea, which I'm sure I butchered. I'm sorry. They call him Big A. He's a huge guy, 6'7", 320, and they need every bit of that wide back to fit his name on the jersey. But yeah, Big A had a really good spring and is definitely in that mix. And then another guy, Alex Foster, he played a couple different spots last year. He missed spring injured, but he should be back. And if nothing else, he'll be a veteran depth guy if he doesn't get one of those starting spots. So yeah, Big A probably at right guard there. And then Alex Foster certainly in the mix as probably one of those tools at backup. And then Philip Ocon is one of the backups at center. I believe John Holthouse is another young guy that is going to push on the scene to be one of the backups as well.
You mentioned the center, Jacob Gardner, being a leader in this room. Who kind of takes over that type of role here in 2025?
Yeah, I think, Trevin Heil does some, just, I think your center, almost like a quarterback, your center has to have some leadership aspects there. But I think Tanner Morley, he's a Colorado kid, vocal, fun personality. He's one of those O-linemen that you're starting to see get some of the NIL deals just because of, the size and personality and everything. So yeah, I think in a lot of ways, Tanner Morley is one of those guys. I won't be surprised. I don't know if he'll be this year, but he's a future captain, I think.
All right, if you had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season in 2025, who would you got?
Okay, I'm going to give you 2 because I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to go Rocky Beers at tight end, and then I'm going to go Jalen Dupree, the running back.
All right. Well, while there hasn't been a head coaching change, we will see a change here on the defensive side of the ball. Tyson Summers comes over from Western Kentucky, where he was the defensive coordinator and safeties coach in 2022 through 2024. And like you mentioned, maybe Jay Norvell wasn't comfortable with that defensive side of the ball. Can you describe the defensive scheme here that Coach Summer plans to run at Colorado State?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Tyson Summers was the defensive coordinator for 1 year way back in, I believe it was 2014 under Mike Bobo before venturing off elsewhere. He was a head coach briefly, and then, like you said, Western Kentucky. But his scheme has evolved a lot since then. He runs, really it's a multiples. It changes pretty frequently. It'll be 3 down linemen, but really when I was talking to him in spring, he said, we ended up getting stuck trying to fit square pegs into round holes in the transfer portal era because you had to remake your roster every year. Said, so forget that. Let's make a defense that evolves based on what your roster is. And so that's really what they try and do, get the best players and then, fit them in what they want to do. But overall, they want high pressure. They're going to bring a lot of bodies, a lot of one-on-one man coverage on the outside. Sort of a high risk, high reward system. If you look at what Western Kentucky teams, big numbers of turnovers forced. So that's the big goal.
Well, we kind of talked about, Jay Norvell maybe not trusting this defensive play calling or however it was. So we ran the ball a little bit more, but Jay Norvell's going into year 4 of his 5-year contract, doesn't have an extension. He's got a $1.5 million buyout in 2025. I've kind of seen teams struggle with the shift and going from a base 4 to a base 3. And as those guys up front in the line kind of require a different type of physical attributes, I guess I would say. Does Jay Norvell's future rest on the defensive on this defense heading into 2025?
Somewhat. I think it's definitely important. I mean, that's a big call to make to totally change your defense. And if it were to completely bust, I don't expect that, but if it were to do that, that would be obviously very damaging and throw a lot of things into question. So yeah, it's a huge change, huge shift. They think they have the bodies. They've had a couple transfers. Denius Jackson is a 6'4", 320 guy from Kentucky. They got another guy from San Jose State College that's 6'3", 300 to kind of plug those gaps up front. But it's a huge call heading into what's really becoming a pretty decisive make or break year for Jay Norvell.
Well, let's get to know the personnel Coach Summers will be coaching. Let's start with that defensive line. Heading into 2024, the Rams needed to replace a lot of production. 2025 is a similar story, but maybe not to the extent that it was last season, where they didn't have a guy like Muhammad Kamara in 2024. But they still look to replace the production of 7 sacks with the loss to Gabe Kershke over to Wake Forest. When digging into this room, I seem to have more concerns with the interior guys necessarily than the edge. But what is your take on this defensive line heading into 2025?
Yeah, I think that concern was probably one of my main ones. Is certainly one of Jay Norvell's main ones until about a week or so ago when they did make those additions. Denius Jackson from Kentucky didn't play for at all for Kentucky last year, but seems to have that physicality. Like I say, another one from a JUCO. And then they actually really like Jernias Tafia as well, a guy that's been in the program a little bit. So though with those three, they probably have the bulk in the middle that they hope to have, plus a couple other young guys that may have it. And then sort of flanking them, Mukinde Wa-Kalonji has been in the program for forever. Just kind of one of those steady guys. He's never going to be the flashiest, but does a lot of things well. And then Andrew Lorch is kind of an up-and-comer that played a decent bit last year. But it's a change, but I think they're feeling fairly confident about where that D-line's at.
Who in this room do you think is kind of ready to take that next step or make a jump here in 2025?
I think Mukinde could be one of those guys, like I say, on the one hand, he's very veteran, but on the other, it's a totally new defense and therefore a new role for him, especially with this style. He has the tools to be quite good and, make some pretty game-wrecking type plays. So I'm excited to see what he does this year.
Well, maybe a 2024 strength is now a 2025 weakness. The linebacker room loses 2 great players to the portal. Chase Wilson turned in another good season, is off to West Virginia, while Boom Jock had a fantastic year filling the shoes of Justin Sanchez and is now off to Cal. Owen Long and Drew Rodriguez were able to play about 9 to 18 snaps per game. It's far from the 60 or so snaps Wilson and Jock were playing. Who's ready to step up into these roles?
Yeah, those are definitely 2 big losses. I think Boom especially has potential to become a superstar. The good thing is Owen Long, like you mentioned, he came on late in the season as a true freshman. And frankly, they love him. They think he has every chance to be an incredible player. They had to ward off some late spring tampering from a couple programs, Power 4 programs. So they're really excited to keep him. It's one of those where one of your best recruiting jobs is not losing a player because they're really excited about Owen Long. And then they brought in a pretty veteran guy in Jacob Ellis, who's last at Iowa State. He's played college football a long time, it seems like. I think he's kind of, a replication of Chase Wilson in a way, of that veteran guy who, is always in the right place. I think he's going to be a big leader on this team as well. I think Jacob Ellis is in for a really good season. So they lost a lot, but kind of added and gained a lot as well. So big turnover, but I think they're actually pretty excited about that linebacker group, which is, it means they have pretty good offseason given what they initially lost. It was a big red flag to lose those guys.
Well, similar to the linebacker room, this defensive backfield lost a lot of 2024 production. They graduated 7 of their top 9 players in terms of snaps. They returned Aiden Hector and Dylan Phelps at cornerback, but at safety, their top returner is Jet Vincent, who played a couple of or handful of snaps per game last season. What has the staff done to address those losses in this room as a whole?
Yeah, that's the secondary as a whole is a big portal overhaul, if you will. Jahari Rogers, CJ Blocker, Lamondre Joe are all cornerbacks come in via the portal. All of those guys will play a lot. At safety, it's an interesting mix. You have Jarmalovic, a transfer from Holy Cross, but you also have a young guy like AJ Noland, who really had a big spring, who's forcing his way onto the field. And then, one of your few holdovers, Aiden Hector, will be on the field a lot as well. So it's a veteran group for the most part outside of Noland, but it's mostly guys that are new to Colorado State. But Norvell thinks that the man coverage capabilities of these corners are going to be better than what they've had over the last few years, which they're going to need because they're going to lean on those guys a lot.
It seemed like in the scheme they played the last couple of years that the safeties, especially Blackburn and Jack Howe, were a big part of run support and racking up some tackles. Can you kind of compare like what your expectations are this year in this new scheme for those safeties, Willie, that you see like a similar role, or maybe they're going to be used differently?
Yeah, I think you'll still see safeties getting down the box a bit on some blitzes and whatnot, but maybe a little bit more full field range than in the box. Because like you say, is especially a guy like, well, actually really both of them, Blackburn and Howe, were huge tackle guys, which there's good and bad to that. Obviously, you want them to be good tacklers, but you also don't always want your safeties being the ones that have to make all the tackles. So they'll be heavily involved there as well, but it is going to look different.
Do you think, given all the losses in this room, do you think that kind of plays into Coach Summers' strength, that given his safety coaching experience?
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of even for guys that were there, it's almost a fresh start. And then when you're bringing in a bunch of new guys, I think in a way it helps when almost everyone's new because you're all kind of starting from the same point. And, you can kind of learn the system, cliche, but blank slate. So, yeah, in some ways, I think that's pretty helpful for them.
Who do you think is ready to make this jump for the secondary here in 2025?
I feel like Jahari Rogers, an SMU transfer, he feels like a guy that's, if Colorado State's going to have a big year, he's going to have his hand on the ball a few times, or maybe more than several times, to really make some game-changing plays. I think he could have a big year.
Well, Kevin, if you had to pick a defensive player to have a breakout type season in 2025, who you got?
I'll go actually a guy that I should have mentioned earlier, Jaquez Evans. He's one of those, you can fit him in different places. He technically goes as, I think they'll list him as a linebacker. He's one of those stand-up pass rushers. He'll be blitzing a lot. He will drop into coverage at times, but his nickname is Donut as well, which is pretty awesome. He's a guy that should have big sack totals this year and create a lot of turnovers. He actually played 4 summers in that Western Kentucky system. So he's one of the guys that does know it really well and is one of the leaders and kind of helping teach it too. So Donut Evans, I think, is going to have a huge year.
Did Evans look healthy? He
had that weird bit at Baylor.
Yeah, well, even I think his last year, Western Kentucky, he had some issues. It was, I guess, he's 3 years from removed where he had like that 100 tackle season, like double-digit sacks.
Yeah, he looked good in spring. He was in the backfield all the time. So, I think CSU fans knocking on wood, but he looked healthy, and if he is healthy, he should be really good.
Well, let's move over to the special teams and how do those units look this spring, and are there any concerns heading into 2025?
That's another one, big overhaul. Torrey Horton was the punt returner and a great one. So obviously when he went down, they had to change, but even his replacement, Caleb Goody, he's gone. Kicker, Jordan Noyes was really reliable. He graduated. Punter, Patty Turner had been there a long time. He graduated. So it's pretty much full changeover. You'll have Tommy Maher will be returning punts. I think he can be good there. I mentioned Lloyd Avant on kicks. Frankly, with half the games at altitude, you don't see that many kickoff returns, but he should be good. It's probably going to be Brian Hansett, punter. He punted some last year when Turner was injured, and he did well. He has a big leg, so I think he'll be fine there. The big question in spring was place kicking. To be very frank, it was not very good. But the good news for CSU, they just recently landed what looks like a pretty big-time transfer in Isaiah Hankins from Baylor. He's like a career 74% guy. 50 of 51 extra points last year, so he's reliable there. Career long of I think it's 51, so he has a bit of a leg. So that, no one really wants to talk about the kicker unless it's really good or really bad. In spring, it was not very good, but Hankins coming in should make it pretty solid position.
Well, now that the spring practice is over, which position group or groups do you think is the most concerning heading into 2025?
I'd say they've plugged a couple of the holes, in the spring portal that I would have initially flagged. I think receiver, not necessarily just weakness actual, but you just need guys who can step up. Who's that 3rd and 6 guy that you throw it to? So more of that of reliability in the key situations, and then I'll probably go the offensive line as well, even though I generally think they feel pretty good about where they're at. They just lost so many starts there that you almost need. I want to see it to, the proof in the pudding and game action that those guys can step in.
In today's age of NIL, revenue sharing, and the transfer portal, how have you seen it change Colorado State's recruiting philosophy?
Yeah, Norvell in his history has always been a sign and develop guy of, find hidden gems. A guy like Torrey Horton, who was hometown Fresno State did not offer him. Norvell did, turned him into an NFL player. But even he's admitted, you still do that. That's part of it. But you're building the roster year to year. And you've seen that this year. They have so many more guys that are being plugged in to potentially be 1-year starters and, are out of eligibility or whatever. Because that's just the way it is there of it. Of you plug holes, and, with NIL too, when there's a spot that is a glaring hole, they try and find the money to throw at someone to fill that.
In today's college football landscape, where the P4 seem to kind of do most of their shopping, if you will, in the transfer portal, are you seeing Colorado State being able to access, higher level recruits maybe than they have been able to in the past?
Yeah, they definitely feel that there is an avenue there, especially on the high school side of guys that, some of the big schools just don't even look at because they'll let them go to G5, let the G5 develop them, and then go try and throw money at them to poach them away. So there's the good and bad of that. You can maybe find a higher profile guy, but then the next task is keeping them.
Well, how do you feel like the staff here at Colorado State's doing navigating the portal?
I think they're much improved, learning how to do it. They're also building systems around. Colorado State joined the general manager trend and added one of those, and Alex Collins. And beyond just Collins, they've added kind of a whole whatever, front office is what it'd be called in the NFL. I don't know what we're calling it in college football, but sort of that off-field system to help navigate all of that. So they have a lot more of that in place now too. Again, we'll see in the fall what it looks like on the field as far as how successful it's been. But to the eye, it seems like they've really beefed up the capability and just personnel to manage that.
What do you think the main strength of this Colorado State team will be as we head into 2025?
I think offensively, it should be diversity in how you can attack. I mentioned you should have a bunch of different receivers and tight ends that can make catches, make it hard for a defense to key on, with a veteran quarterback that should be able to spread around. And then, good running back play. If this offense is clicking, it should be really diverse in how it can beat you. And then defensively, I think it has a chance to be a high turnover defense that causes a lot of problems that way.
Well, Kevin, what does success look like for the Rams in 2025?
So won 8 games last year, made first bowl since 2017. We're 1 game away from making the Mountain West Championship game. And, the kind of phrase going around the program is, that's got to be the basement. 8 wins, 8 wins and up should be where this program is at. Obviously, depending a little bit on what the schedule looks like and all that. But I think with the investment that's been put in, just quote unquote being 6-6 and, scraping into bowl eligibility probably isn't good enough for this program anymore.
What do you think it's going to take for Norvell to get an extension? Like, what's the minimum?
I'd say probably need to get beyond 6. 7's a funky territory. I think 8 and beyond, certainly beyond, does it. A little bit matters on who you beat and who you lose to, how it looks and all that. Beating rivals and winning, 8+ games, would certainly lock it in.
Well, Kevin, we've covered a lot of ground today, but is there anything else you want to share or think that we should know about this 2025 Colorado State Rams football team?
No, I think we've hit it pretty good. If anyone is ever considering coming out, they did a nice job on the stadium. It's a pretty fun place to visit, I would say, and you can go taste some of those local breweries that Rocky Beers can't partner with.
Well, Kevin, thank you very much for taking time out of your day to spend with us and sharing your knowledge. We greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys. It was fun.
If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.